Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel. So today's video follows on from my previous video that you may have seen, which was a first impressions of the bread maker. And today I wanted to make the bread in two parts. So first we're going to get the machine to knead and rise the dough, and then I'm going to put it in separately to bake. And this is going to allow me to take out the panels, and we can then have a look and see whether this is worth doing or whether it's best just to leave it to make the whole bread loaf by itself. So here you can see I'm just using some scales and I'm just weighing out the ingredients, and usually I'll put in all my dry ingredients first and then add the liquids, but I have followed the same kind of format that they use for the recipe for the bread maker. This isn't their recipe just because I found their bread loaf was a bit too salty for my liking, but it is very similar. To be honest, because I'm making the bread today and I'm not leaving a delay in the bread dough being kneaded together, I could really add the ingredients in anyway, and usually they have a set format because you don't want your yeast and your sugar to come together before it's being kneaded. I will leave all the ingredients down in the description box below. Another thing to mention is that I'm actually making enough dough for 2 loaves, and that's so that I can freeze half of the dough as well, but I'll leave the ingredients for 1 loaf down below. So now all the ingredients are in, I've just loaded the bread pan into the machine, and you can see here I tried to turn it on, but that took a couple of attempts, and then I'd actually picked the wrong program the first time I went round. So I'd gone for program 7, but I needed program 6. You can just see here I'm just sorting all of that out. But once it's on the right program, so this will take 1 hour and 50 minutes, and you just press play. It's usually a good idea just to check up on the dough part way through, just to check that it doesn't need any more liquid or any more flour added to it, and away it goes. So you can see it's all combined together now, and it's starting to look a lot more like a bread dough. Okay, so a little confession, I left this in a little bit longer than the 1 hour 50 minutes because I'd taken Charlie out for a walk, so I did get quite a bit of air into it, but that's okay. So I put a bit of flour down on a work surface, and then you can see there's quite a lot of dough still, even when it was knocked back in the bread pan there. So just shaking this out onto the surface. And then you can see in here there was one of the kneading blades that was still in the bread pan, so that one was easy. But then I had to find the other one, which you'll see here. And I found it eventually, but it wasn't too bad finding them, to be honest. And the dough here, it was fairly sticky, but it was still easy to sort of handle. It didn't come away in clumps on your hand or really stick to your hands too much there. So here I'm just knocking the air out of the dough. Then I've just used a sharp knife. You can get more expensive tools than this, but I just like to use what I have in the kitchen, and I've just roughly divided the dough into half. You can weigh the whole amount of the dough and then divide the dough by half equally that way, but this is just for me, so I'm not too bothered if one's a little bit bigger or smaller than the other. But you can see it does shape really nicely, and once you sort of shape it a bit, it's also really smooth, which I really liked. So the other half in the bowl over there, I'm just going to freeze that for another day, and that actually made the focaccia, which you can see on one of my short videos, and I'll put a link down in the description box if you want to check that out. And here you can see I'm just trying to shape the loaf a little bit here, so I've just tucked in all the sides, and really what I'm trying to do is just have one seam along the bottom of the loaf there, just because that will always be its weakest point as well.
While wishing for something better, I try to fix things that weren't broken, misunderstandings and words unspoken. We fall apart and I won't dare to say, do you feel the same way? Maybe you don't.
So I love scoring the top of bread, and I decided to give that a go. And in hindsight, I probably would have just left it to one score, but I want to try out this crisscross shape, and you'll see later why I would leave that out next time.
If we don't feel the same way, then don't pretend that everything's okay.
Then I put the bread back into the bread pan, but without the kneading blades in it, which you can just see there. And then it takes just under an hour to bake the loaf of bread. So I thought it'd be much easier to get the loaf out, but it was still quite difficult even without the kneading blades. But you can see it's left these tiny little dots or holes even, and they're okay compared to the big gap you had before. It's a big improvement. Now you can see here the top of the loaf of bread is a bit lighter in colour than I'd probably like, and a lot of the colour is on the bottom part of the loaf here, and the crisscross shape that I tried out is quite spread along the loaf as well, so I would miss that off next time. I'd probably just do one line down the middle, and it actually did make it quite hard to cut the bread just because it was such a different shape as well. So I let the loaf cool down for a little bit, and it does come out really hot, so make sure you've got some oven gloves when you take it out as well. And then this is just me cutting the first slice. And I think I actually cut into this loaf a little bit too early because the knife did catch a bit on the bread, and I think maybe if I'd left it longer it would have been a little bit easier to cut. But we got there in the end. and actually it had a fairly good crumb as well. It was really soft and quite bouncy, which I liked as well. So I do think, particularly on the larger part of the loaf here, that it is worth taking the kneading blades out, just because you get a lot more bread as well. And you can see here I cut another slice, and this was the bit that was really hard to cut with the crisscross shape on the top. So I ended up taking that off. It tasted really good. I do think that the bread maker kneads the dough really well. I think on the bake option it would be nice to be able to choose the colour crust you want, as you can do that when you make it all in one go. It does have that option. So I do want to try making a loaf of bread without the crisscross score along the top. So I think that would just be a lot easier to cut if it was just uniform along the top as well. And I also want to knead some dough in the bread maker, but then bake it using the Dutch oven, because I do enjoy scoring the bread. I think it can come out really pretty, and I really like the shape as well. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment, and please consider subscribing. I have new videos out each week, which is either about food or about my Chow Chow Charlie. And this here was the bread with just a bit of butter on it, and I had this with some soup. Bye!